Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So happy to be back in Vancouver. This is a second home for me, as you know well, for all my years living, teaching, growing up out here. So it's always a pleasure to be back on a nice, beautiful Vancouver day. I want to start by thanking Kate and Gardy for welcoming us to their home. Thank you. Great to see the kids. And great to have a conversation about the challenges that so many people are facing here in the Lower Mainland, but quite frankly, right across the country as well. It's a challenge around housing. We know that housing is much more of a preoccupation for many people as they're trying to get into the housing market, as we're seeing prices rise across the country. We're seeing challenges finding that perfect home. And that's why this government chose to make three big moves in our last budget that are going to help families across the country get into this housing market. The first one is around savings. We need to make sure that families can save up for a down payment. And that's why we've created a first-time home buyers savings account, which actually will save up to $40,000 tax-free on the way in, tax-free on the way out, so people can help with that first down payment. And I know for a lot of people that'll make a big difference. We're also going to move forward on increasing supply. We know the reality is there's just not enough supply of homes out there in the country. That's why we're committing $4 billion to work with municipalities on the Accelerated Housing Fund to make sure that whether it's through density or zoning or new projects, municipalities can actually respond to this supply crisis and double the number of new housing starts across the country over the coming decade. That's going to be a key part because we continue to be a growing country. We continue to welcome in people from around the world. We continue to see young people like Charles and Hudson wanting to get into the market in the coming years. They need to be able to have homes to get into. And finally, we're going to be curbing speculation. We're going to be cracking down on the unfair practices we're seeing, whether it's blind bidding, whether it's the fact that we're going to be preventing foreign home buyers from getting into the residential market for the next 2 years. We're going to continue to look at ways to make sure that the market is fairer by stepping up on a home buyer's bill of rights to make the situation fairer for people. Il y a des grands enjeux au niveau du logement, mais c'est pour ça qu'on est en train d'aller de l'avant pour empêcher la spéculation et protéger les droits des acheteurs, pour augmenter l'offre en investissant 4 milliards de dollars dans les municipalités pour assurer qu'on construit beaucoup plus de maisons dans les années à venir et aussi d'aider les gens à épargner jusqu'à 40 000 dollars avec notre compte libre d'impôt pour qu'ils puissent acheter une première maison. Il y a beaucoup d'autres enjeux sur lesquels on est en train de travailler, mais je sais que c'est un enjeu qui revient souvent, particulièrement ici à Vancouver, où ça fait longtemps qu'il y a des grands défis au niveau du logement. It's always a real pleasure to be here in Vancouver. Thank you again to Kate and Grady for welcoming us to their home, and I look forward to taking your questions.
OK, merci. On va commencer avec la première question. Nous avons jusqu'à 20 minutes pour des questions. We have up to 20 minutes for questions. Be one question, one follow-up per reporter. We can go ahead with the first question.
Hi, Mr. Prime Minister. I was wondering if you suggested last week that the U.S. efforts to ease the infant formula shortage could worsen the problem in Canada here. But what specific steps are you taking with the U.S. to mitigate that kind of risk beyond looking to import formula from outside North America? And doesn't the U.S. have an obligation to avoid taking steps that would unduly harm its trusted ally, that's us?
We've been working closely with the American administration to make sure that we are securing our continued supply of baby formula. We see the shortage in the United States. In Canada, we've been monitoring carefully what the situation is. The reality is we're still looking like we're fine on baby formula. There are a few challenges around some more specialized formulas for particularly vulnerable kids. But again, we are confident that the work that we're doing to secure supply from elsewhere and to ensure that Canadians have those options is going to be fine.
And just turning to Kamloops yesterday, I was wondering how you feel about the reaction where some of the people seemed quite a bit angry with you, and the others were the complete opposite, and they were welcoming you with hugs and things?
First of all, I was honored to be invited by the Chief and Council to be part of the commemoration of 1 year since they found unmarked graves outside of the site of the former Kamloops residential school. It has been a very difficult year, not just for people in Kamloops, but for people right across the country. Indigenous people who have long known that lots of kids went to these schools and never came home, but Canadians who discovered in shock that residential schools had graveyards beside them because so many kids passed away. These are things that Canada needs to grapple with. And of course, there's a need for healing, there's a need for partnership, but there's also going to be a lot of trauma and anger. And I was incredibly touched by the number of elders who thanked me and said that it was important that the federal government be here and continue to be there in supporting them. I spoke to young people who were really excited about the fact that we were all together working. But there were a number of people who are still very, very hurt by this and who are angry. And quite frankly, they have a right to be angry. Canada was responsible for horrific things happening to Indigenous people, and those injustices continue, not just in the past, but in the present today, with socioeconomic outcomes, challenges, mental health challenges, so many different ways where the legacy of residential schools lives on today and into tomorrow that we need to take action on. So I was grateful to be there, grateful to hear people's perspectives, and grateful to be able to continue to insist and demonstrate that the federal government will be there as a partner on reconciliation for the long term.
Okay, next question.
Hi, Prime Minister. So when it comes to the passport application process, why was your government so unprepared when it came to this influx of Canadians trying to renew or get their passport? We're seeing lengthy delays, long lineups. People aren't even able to access the passport office. A major oversight and unpreparedness on the government's part, and someone needs to take responsibility.
Actually, as of about December or January, we started the hiring process for new passport officers. We hired on 500 new passport office workers because we knew that with the economy starting to open up, with COVID starting to be in the rearview mirror, or at least getting into a manageable phase, more people would want to travel. So it would be, this is cold comfort for people who are still struggling, but it would be even worse if we had not started the hiring process back at the beginning of the year for 500 new workers across the country. We continue to work very, very carefully with Service Canada, with passport offices, to make sure that people are able to get their passports quickly. We're delivering about 43,000 passports a week. Demand is still higher than that. So we're encouraging people to go on the website for instructions. If you're traveling imminently, in a very short order, there is a process, but if you know that you have a little while before you travel, there's another process that you can take on. We're trying to manage this as best we possibly can, but ultimately it is good news that people are starting to travel again. It's great to put this pandemic somewhat behind us, even though we know we continue to have to be vigilant, and we're working to solve the challenges around passports as quickly as we possibly can. But the reality is a lot of people went 2 years not traveling and didn't renew their passports because there was no expectation that they'd be traveling at that time, and there's a bit of a rush now that we're dealing with as best we possibly can.
Follow-up?
And yes, so there's a new report today out from the University of Ottawa regarding national security. Four former national security advisors to the Prime Minister, quote, concluding that the traditional approach to national security no longer sustainable, and that Canada is not ready to face this new world of security threats. Now, do you agree with these sentiments, and what ought to be done?
There is no question that the world is changing rapidly and getting more dangerous in new ways than ever before. When we look at the prevalence of misinformation, of disinformation, the way social media has been weaponized both by foreign actors and by people within Canada pushing extremist views, trying to foment anger and discord. whether it's extremist ideology and right-wing terrorism on the rise in Canada, or whether it's examples like the illegal protests we saw in the winter. There are a whole new set of challenges that we need to be responding to, and that's why we're working closely with our national security agencies, working closely with organizations like the Canadian Security Establishment around communications to make sure that we are able to respond to these new realities. We need to do it, however, in a way that continues to defend freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to protest, to legally protest, while at the same time we're taking on more tools to keep Canadians safe. Because increasingly we're seeing that things that start online end up having impacts on the real world.
Next question.
Pouvez-vous répéter en français cette question?
Je pense que la réalité qu'on doit comprendre, c'est que le monde est en train de changer et il y a des nouvelles menaces à notre société, à notre pays, qu'on ne voyait pas il y a plusieurs années. Avec la mésinformation, la désinformation, l'outil des médias sociaux utilisés de façon de plus en plus agressive et ciblée pour influencer, pour détourner, pour miner une démocratie. Nous devons de rester très vigilants. On voit une montée de racisme, on voit une montée de terrorisme de droite. Nous avons besoin de nouveaux outils. C'est pour ça que nous investissons dans nos institutions de sécurité pour se doter de nouvelles façons de garder les gens en sécurité dans un monde où ce qui se passe sur l'Internet ne reste pas sur l'Internet, a des impacts dans la vraie vie trop souvent néfastes. Mais nous allons toujours, bien sûr, être là pour protéger la liberté d'expression, la libre capacité de manifester paisiblement. C'est des éléments importants que nous devons toujours protéger, tout en assurant qu'on protège aussi le bien-être des Canadiens.
Prochaine question.
Mr. Prime Minister, why was Canada left out of President Biden's Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity that launched this week with a dozen countries? Are we not a Pacific nation?
Canada is, along with a dozen other partners, a member of the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, a free trade deal, the biggest free trade arrangement in the Pacific. It has been a source of growth for us in our trading relationships with the Indo-Pacific. It was a trading agreement that actually Obama helped launch, but the U.S. ultimately chose not to be part of. So the fact that the U.S. isn't in the CPTPP means that they're having to look for ways to try and create connections with countries in the Pacific that they don't have a free trade deal with. Fortunately, Canada has the free trade deal with the CPTPP, and we have a free trade deal with the U.S. That was just renewed with the new NAFTA. So it is not something that directly affects us because we already have such access with the CPTPP that we worked very, very hard to sign a number of years ago.
Okay, so you're not going to seek membership to this new network?
We're taking a look at it. I think it's always a good thing when countries agree to work together, but the U.S. wouldn't be doing that if they had actually been in the CPTPP, like was originally planned by the previous administrations.
Okay, next question.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, même avec un compte libre d'impôt de 40 000 $, comment allez-vous aider des familles comme celle-ci à acheter des maisons quand le prix peut être de 1,5 million à 2 millions de $, ici dans la région de Vancouver par exemple?
Ça fait longtemps que je suis ici à Vancouver au cours des années pour parler de la crise du logement. On a fait des investissements dans notre stratégie nationale pour le logement qui a aidé des millions de familles à pouvoir acheter une nouvelle propriété. En même temps, nous avons reconnu dans ce dernier budget qu'il fallait en faire plus. Oui, le compte d'épargne va aider certains, mais ce ne sera pas assez pour tout le monde parce que la réalité, c'est que je pense que les gens savent très bien qu'il n'y a pas une seule façon de régler la crise du logement. Il y a tellement de différents facteurs, que nous nous devons de se doter d'une gamme d'outils, d'options et de programmes pour les aider sans avoir des effets néfastes sur le marché actuel. Donc, on voit déjà que les mesures qu'on a mis de l'avant pour créer plus d'offres avec les municipalités, pour aider les familles avec l'épargne, pour réduire la spéculation et les pratiques injustes, sont en train d'aider, mais nous allons continuer d'être là pour aider.
All right, Peter Van Dusen watching along with you. Seem to have lost that feed from Vancouver with the Prime Minister talking about housing measures. His government has included, he's back now, let's listen in.
Ce projet de loi et nous allons continuer d'être là pour défendre ces principes de base pour les minorités à travers le pays.
This is me. Good morning, Prime Minister. Going back to the Iran friendly game that Vancouver is going to be hosting here, have you talked to Soccer Canada about your concerns? Where are you on that?
I've expressed my concern that I think this game was a bad idea. I can assure you that Sport Canada has not delivered any funding for this game. And in terms of the ability of those players to come to Canada and the teams to come to Canada, the border services agencies make professional and independent decisions on eligibility for people to come to Canada.
Okay. One more here for you. The flooding in BC about 6 months ago. I think it may surprise you. You may learn this, that several people still haven't received any disaster relief. Your concerns there, and have you talked to the Premier about that? And can the feds help with them?
The federal government is there through a disaster relief program that flows money to the provinces, to municipalities. We're there as a partner. We know that this past year we've seen extreme weather events, whether it was fires in Lytton or floods displacing families. As orders of government, we are working together to try and be there to support people as best we can. And I will follow up to make sure that if there's anything the federal government can do more, that we're there to help.
Okay, thank you. And we'll take the last question. CBC.
Bill 96 is about to be adopted in Quebec. Will your government intervene in court?
The job of the federal government under my watch is to always be there to protect minorities across this country, particularly official languages minorities. I was a French teacher here in BC. I know how important it is to support Francophone communities outside of Quebec. But it's also extremely important to make sure that we're protecting the Anglophone communities inside of Quebec. We have concerns about the latest version of Bill 96 that is being voted on, I believe, this afternoon. But we continue to watch very, very carefully what final form it will take, and we'll make our decisions based on what we see as the need to keep minorities protected across this country.
Follow up.
You said that there will be a full investigation into the shooting of Shirin Abu Akleh, and will your government support an international criminal court investigation as requested by the Palestinian Authority to her colleagues, or will you be satisfied with Israel investigating itself?
We need to make sure that it is absolutely clear that journalists doing their jobs anywhere around the world need to be protected. Our democracies depend on the professional, independent work of journalists, of media, and for them to be, for any of them to be targeted and killed in the line of duty is absolutely unacceptable. That's why we have called for proper and full and credible investigation into this terrible shooting, and we look forward to getting answers to what this happened, how it could happen, and mostly how we make sure it never happens again.
Thank you, and that concludes today's press conference. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Well, why don't I come over and say hi to you?